Tom, I was wondering, so you've mentioned Robert Monroe a couple times. Have you had out-of-body experiences where you've communicated with him or had any information given that way?
Yes, I did. Within the first probably month or so of his passing, we did communicate some, but that was about all, and he went on with his business and I went on with mine. There wasn't a need to stay in contact for a long time, but yes.
So was it just that one conversation, and has he moved on to like a higher realm or plane, or?
Yes, of course he's moved on. Everybody moves on. There's no profit in just hanging out. So it doesn't take long usually before that moving on takes place. And when you move on, well, even let's put it this way: after you pass out of this reality frame, after you die here in this virtual reality, your memory of this virtual reality begins to fade like a dream. Okay, and that's necessary that it happens that way. And that'll disappoint a lot of people because they're lovers forever, and this world and next, and so on. But those memories fade. You need to get back in the game. It's not like you're done. It's like that was one chapter. You need to get back in the game. You don't get back in the game as the same body that you were, not even necessarily the same sex or the same whatever. It's a whole different ball game. So once you're back into the game, that's what you're in. Now your records in the database are all there. So you can go to past lives and things in the database, and it's just very, very similar to talking to the actual person, because after all, it's a very complete database. It's all the emotions, all the feelings, all the thoughts, as well as all the things done and not done, and etc. So it's very complete. Matter of fact, the only thing that's really different than that, and speaking to the person, is free will. That database doesn't have free will, but it's got all the information. And unless you're clever, you'll never notice the difference. But you can be clever by asking it questions that you would expect maybe to get a different answer for at different times. There are questions that are kind of, how some questions could be answered this way or that way, and it really isn't a big deal which way they're answered. And most people, if you ask them that question 6 or 7 times, at least 2 or 3 of the times would be different, if they didn't remember. And then you can go into that situation and play that game and find out that they're never different, because there's no free will involved in it. So that is to be expected, that a person will quickly be involved elsewhere. That entity now is just a historical entity. That Bob Monroe now is just a historical figure, period. That consciousness is often maybe, Susie Q, some other adventure. So that entity that lived Bob Monroe's life and accumulated his experience is gone. The Bob Monroe is gone, that's what I'm saying. Now it's somebody else, somewhere else, some other thing, and that memory vanishes quickly. So when you call that back, typically what you're getting is data out of the database, not really interfacing with that particular entity. Now, when I say these things, I'm giving you just the answer under the fat part of the curve. What that means is that there's almost everything is possible. I'm just giving you what's most likely. Okay. So there's exceptions to everything. These are not fast rules. This system is a wide open system, and there's, it's not wise to ever say always, never, impossible, that sort of thing, because there'll always be exceptions that will prove you wrong.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You mentioned earlier Princeton Anomaly Labs and other people who are doing research on these things. Obviously, somebody is giving a lot of money for this research to go on. At the same time, you have official denial of the whole thing. So what is going on?
Yeah, well, Princeton, the way they got into that is a graduate student came to the head of the Department of Engineering with a project that she wanted to do. It was a young lady, and the project had to do with using intent to modify output, I think, of random number generators or something like that, something she had heard about or read about. And since it had to do with information and random number generators and so on, she asked her professor, who happened to be head of the department, could I do this? And his reply was something like, well, if you want to, but it's not going to amount to anything. But if you want to do that, go ahead. She did it, and it did amount to something, and he checked her work, and it still amounted to something. So he said, wow, let's study this. So they did, and that was really the beginning of the PAIR labs. So their funding was funding because they're a research house in Princeton, and they got funded through Princeton, like any other department gets funded in Princeton. Eventually, they kind of broke off, I guess, because they were specializing just in this stuff. And usually what happens then at a university kind of gets broken off as its own thing. And today, now they are thinking of going commercial, producing products, because their mind affects matter research is so dependable that they can actually build products around it that do things. So they're in the mode now of coming up with products to market to pay their own way. But up until this time, they were just funded as an academic place doing research. It's like this. In academia, to get somebody to officially stand up and say that mind affects matter is very difficult. You see, nobody wants to be caught in public saying such heresy. But off the record, minds are a lot more open. Off the record, where it's not viewed by your peers and therefore necessary to be ridiculed, off the record, they're a lot more open-minded. So the fact that they continue to get funding doesn't show as much. Well, they're a university organization, they should be funded just like everybody else. So the people funding it obviously didn't think that it was a waste of time, or they wouldn't have kept spending money on it. But then that's not like a public statement. So we got a little duplicity going on in the scientific community. Private interviews tend to be a lot more open-minded than public interviews. And privately, those people that decline it from being published in mainstream journals, privately, probably over half of them think it was really a good idea and that it was good research. But they can't do any differently. Yeah, strange world we live in, right? That's the way it works. And it's not just science. It's not like science has this problem. It's everything has this problem. There is the status quo and the way things work and the way most of the people in a particular profession believe. And if you run counter to that, then you're ridiculed. You're marginalized. So that's what happens. And one day it'll get right now the thing that's turning it around is the virtual reality. It's becoming more and more the only thing that answers the experiment, that gives you a right answer. So more and more it's being taken seriously. People can't get to a right. We have all these anomalies that don't make sense. They have an expanding universe, which is impossible because the universe is all reality there is. Then what is it expanding into? They have a Big Bang that started our universe, but it couldn't have started from our universe because before the Big Bang we didn't have a universe. That's what created our universe. So it had to be prior to our universe, and our universe is all reality there is. So how could that happen? You see, we've got double slit experiments that particles aren't really particles, they're probability distributions, and on it goes. We have entanglement, we have all these things that basically hit a dead end in the scientific belief. The scientific belief system just gets to them and says, oh, can't be answered. Weird science, let's go on to the next thing. And these weird science things are stacking up. And people are beginning to see, well, I can answer this one and this one and this one with an assumption of virtual reality, and I can answer. So it's just better physics. And eventually better physics will win. But it takes a long time. You have to overcome a huge belief inertia. So we're just in that phase where I think it's actually getting, the turning over is getting quicker now. Every couple of months, somebody sends me an article that was published somewhere that says virtual reality is the right way to go. Somebody in the physics community. So it tends to be moving that way, but it'll take lots of people. When you get to the part that the majority feel that way, maybe even the large majority, then and once they actually talk to each other and realize that most of them actually feel that way and it's not just a private thing, then things will turn around, I think, fairly quickly. But the undercurrent is there and strong.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm just wondering, in this reality here, we have people that are out to manipulate us and deceive us and try and lead us away from our evolution, as you would say. When you go over and go into the other dimensions, is it the same kind of agenda run by other beings out there that try to stop you because it's part of your learning reality, on the other?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. It's not a whole lot different than it is here. There are competing factions, if you will, there, just like there are competing factions here. In the outer body reality and in the larger reality, every reality that's experiential means it's a reality in which you can experience. Okay? All of those realities have free will, because once you have experience, you have choice. And when you have choice, you have free will. Where you have free will, you can have people who are nice and people who are not nice, because it's free will. They don't have to, all be nice and learned and, sweet little angels. They can be whatever they want to be with whatever it is they've got there. And you almost always have the negative as well as the positive. It's just, that's the way it is. So most reality frames, all reality frames that are experiential, which is all the ones you can experience in, so that's all the ones, right? Otherwise, you're like that reality frame where it's not experiential and all you can do is exchange data. It's like being in a chat room with billions. Well, if you talk about all the consciousness and trillions of trillions, and that's not very productive.
Once you get to a higher level of consciousness, does the competing stop? Once you get higher?
It does. It tends to drop off, because what happens is that the negative side of this evolution chain is very self-limiting. Negativity burns itself out. Negativity is based on fear. So fear is the underlying ethic there. And when you're based on fear, you don't have trust. When you don't have trust, you're self-destructive. You can't, it's hard to form up in a team when nobody on the team trusts each other, you see. The best you can do is form up on a team that they all claim to trust each other so that they can get somebody else, right? That sort of thing. But those relationships don't really last a long time, because there's always somebody else that sees it differently and there's a lot of competition. So it's very inefficient and is self-destructive. So basically, as you go up or down the evolutionary ladder, okay, as it may be, you'll find that negativity starts to top out in what it can do and what it can influence. So it's mainly at the kind of lower levels. You get to a point where, if we turn negativity around and say it's going up just like this, negativity and the positive side can both evolve, I guess, and then the negative side gets topped out and the evolution on the positive side keeps on going. So if you're up in this area, then you don't have a lot that you have to deal with, but it's still there, you see. So now where are we? We're down here in a noise someplace. So we get it all the time, out of body or in our body. There's still negative stuff going on, and wherever you have free will, you have ego. Wherever you have fear, you have ego. And if you have ego, you've got people who aren't so nice. You've got schemes. You've got plans. You've got conspiracies. You've got all kinds of things that will take place just because that's the nature of consciousness. It has to have free will, or it isn't consciousness. And free will can be unpleasant. It can de-evolve as well as evolve. And the way it de-evolves, and one of the reasons it's limited, when you're evolving toward becoming love, okay, lowering your entropy. How do you do that when you're de-evolving? You're basically, it's not that you're evolving toward fear, which is, of course, is what's going on, but you're controlling your mental states with control. It's control, power, force. So here you learn to be a better person, and being a better person opens up things like out of body and healing and that kind of stuff, just naturally kind of open up to you because you've evolved to a point where that's just natural for you. Whereas on the downside, these things like healing or hurting don't just open up to you, you have to control. It's a control thing. So control only can go so deep. Again, it's self-defeating. Ego tears itself down. So it's not a good road to go on. The negative is a short-sighted way to go. But there's not as much of that if you just kind of counted noses. Those who de-evolve are much fewer than those who evolve. It's a much smaller percentage. On the other hand, it only takes one person a small amount of time to tear something down that took a lot of people a long time to build. So kind of balances out a little bit, but it's a very small minority. But small minorities can be destructive.
Yeah, I was thinking about everything on this reality is escalating towards war at the minute. You know, they're all saying it's escalating that way. Will that negativity de-evolve on this reality, and the opposite happen? And we start evolving on this reality.
Well, we're evolving here, and what you see out in the world when you watch the news and look at the papers and the internet, what you see out there, which isn't a pretty sight, that's us. You're seeing a very accurate representation of we the people, we the humans. Okay, that's what you see. It's like that because we're like that. So it's a good reflection of where we are in our evolution. And yes, we are evolving. And yes, I think progress is made. I think there's a big difference between now and, say, 14th, 15th century. There's been progress made, but it's a slow progress. And it has its ups and downs. And it has its moments. And like any other progress, sometimes you get a boost of positive progress just because you fell to such a terrible low. Sometimes it's the low that initiates the rise. So it's that kind of thing. It comes and goes. In general, I think we're on an upward trend and progressing okay, but it's slow. It's dishearteningly slow. It's just where we are. It's not that this world, this evil world that we're in is terrible and we don't belong here because it's so evil. It's that evil world because that's the way we are. The reason that often that politicians and leadership become corrupt and do things that aren't nice, it's because they're just like everybody else. They have lots of fear, lots of ego. They're no different than anybody else except they have power. So now their fear and ego gets to be spread far and wide, whereas somebody who doesn't have any power, all they can do is holler at their children and kick the dog. You see? But if you have the president of a country that has a lot of guns, now you can wreak havoc in a wider scale. But mostly it's not a big difference. It's our quality. We elect people who are like us, who represent us. So we can't blame it on them, unless you separate yourself from humanity. It's we the humans. Make our world, make our reality. There's a lot of ways in which we create our own reality. It's just the way the consciousness system works, is we create our own reality, and once you create it, you got to live in it. That's part of the feedback.
Thank you.
Can I ask two questions? If that's okay. Well, the first one I think you already answered during your talk. So thank you. But I still have some doubts because it's been niggling me for the last year. When we were here in November last year, with all of the sort of spirit activity that was going on, I thought I had several OBEs, but I couldn't really frame them in the context of the other people's experiences and the little that I'd read or seen on YouTube or whatever. And I have a slight shamanic background, and so I think I was maybe mixing up or using that as a platform to the experience. But with all of the spirit activity here, I got out of body, I think, on 2 separate occasions, but I was kind of formless, and I certainly couldn't experience touching or tasting or in the way that I would as if we were operating in this reality. And
probably because you were formless.
Well,
and if you were formless, you didn't have a tongue. How could you taste?
Well, I felt I was made up of tiny little stars and of pulses of light, but otherwise transparent, or at least in 1 or 2 of the experiences. And I don't remember leaving my body, so the way that you were explaining that wasn't necessarily the proof that I might have been looking for really made me feel more comfortable with accepting and validating those experiences. But when I came downstairs, the first experience, I was kind of playing with light orbs that people were photographing around the house, and I mean it felt real, but just otherworldly. And the next experience, I was down here. I kind of enacted a shamanic ritual that I didn't even think I could do, which was something along the lines of psychopomp, which is helping souls to find the light. And I sent a tsunami of love and light throughout the room. I didn't know I could do that, but there was a vortex here, and lots of spirits just got sucked up. And then, I went back to being me. And so they were both kind of weird and wonderful experiences. And I wasn't sure. Whether I just imagined them or whether they were. So all year I've been like, okay, well, were those?
But you see, there's no problem in not being sure. That's okay. There's a problem in letting not be sure be a problem. You see, if not being sure is a problem for you, then that's not good. Not being sure, if it's just like, well, I don't really know for sure, but I'll just accept it at face value, just the way it is. It just was the way it is, and it may have been just exactly the way I saw it, and more data will come in. Sure. That's a better attitude than this constant, was I making it up, was I not? And so you shouldn't let the fact that you aren't sure. Like I say, very few things in life will ever be a 0 or a 1. And we need to stop looking for 0s and 1s. We look for 0s and 1s because we don't like living with uncertainty. We don't want to be uncertain. We want to be certain about things, but life isn't that kind. It doesn't give us much that we can be certain. We can't even be certain how old we are and who our mother is. There's no proof. You see, so life is full of uncertainty, and you just take the experience at face value. It was what it was. Don't second guess it. Don't analyze it. Don't feel like because you can't prove it or have evidence that it's not as good. It is just as good. It was an experience. This is just an experience. That was just data. This is just data. You see? It's not, don't judge that by this. Take what was there from it, how you felt, how it, how did you feel with it? How did how did it hit you? Right, it felt amazing. Then take joy. Take joy in that amazement. Take joy in that feeling and say, that was good. And if you liked it, you can say, I'd maybe like to revisit that. You see, so find joy in it, use it, take what you can out of it. Don't second guess it. Don't try to justify it. Don't try to, do anything with it other than just have it. And okay, it's not a 1-0 probability. Maybe it's a 0.8 or a 0.9 or 0.999. It doesn't matter. It was a useful experience for you. It's yours. Hold on to it. And don't feel like you have to validate it. Sure. There's no validation required.
Well, it's just because I still very much have my training wheels on, and I guess I have an attachment to validating my experience.
Right.
Yeah, and to framing it. But the second question was, we discussed this a lot last year, so sorry, Todd, if I'm going to be a bit of a bore here, about the ultimate goal. So the very first OB I'm pretty sure I had was helped by ayahuasca, and the shaman asked me how far I wanted to go, and I said all the way. And I think I went to beyond any virtual reality that can be framed visually or in language, but certainly felt an ecstasy that was not human. And again, I was sort of floating consciousness. I think I was in a star with other souls, but that were not recognizable in any way, other than just the sensation that, or the message that I got from the experience, that I was with some very highly evolved entities of some sort, and there's no way that I can frame it in language.
Yeah, the message being there that you're not alone. Yeah. You know, that this is larger than just you and just them, but you're not alone. So you get these little metaphors.
Well, it was so I got as far as I thought I could go. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a lot more beyond that. So that felt like I was in a place of pure love. I passed out. I can't remember anything else after that. But I felt I was in a place of pure love, distilled and refined and magnified. You know, it was as potent as anything I could possibly imagine, and then some, then a lot more. So from my shamanic experience, the conclusion from my own experience and so far has been that the end goal is love, and all of the OBEs or supposed OBEs that I've had so far seem to back that up, because every time I feel I get out of my body, the experiences are connected to the same kind of lesson. But you know, that could also be because that's what I'm hoping to find at the end.
That's the end goal. The end goal is to grow up and become love. That's the whole point of your existence here. Okay, that's why you're in this virtual reality, because your evolution is the evolution of the consciousness system, and that's what we do. You know, we evolve. That's kind of our role in this big system.
So we talked sometimes at length. We had quite a, well, it probably lasted for the whole week, actually, this discussion about the nature of why we were here, and how important love was, and if love was a byproduct or an important element of that, or whether it was actually the final destination. And my belief system is pointing towards believing that love is central to everything. It's a byproduct and it's the destination. But see, the destination doesn't actually, you don't get to an end. You know, the system is constantly evolving itself. So you're just moving toward becoming love. There's always other things to do, other people to help. Is love the juice that powers the supercomputer, or is the supercomputer is the supercomputer managed by the whatever source of love?
You're breaking things apart that can't be broken apart. is what creates that logical issue. It's love is basically the larger consciousness system reducing its entropy, evolving, growing. That's what it does. As it lowers its entropy, as it evolves, it becomes love. That's, you know, those two things go together. It's not that one creates the other, but if it doesn't become love, then it becomes more random, less information. It disintegrates. So it's just a system that's evolving. And the way it evolves is by becoming love. If you look in the workshops, I have a little piece there where I try to connect the growing, lowering entropy and evolving the system and becoming love. But consciousness is a social system. It's many individuated units of consciousness interacting. Consciousness is not a single consciousness. This is one consciousness system, but just like a many-celled thing, it's got lots of subsets of consciousness, such as you and I. Okay, because it's an interactive system, it turns out that the optimal interaction between individuated units of consciousness is love. So if you want to optimize the interaction, by optimizing the interaction means getting as much content out of it as possible, then it moves toward love. The opposite, moving toward fear, is a disintegration. So if you're in interaction with other people, okay, you optimize that interaction by interacting with love. So if there's 10 other people and all of you care about each other, you as a group will optimize what you can do, what you can produce, what you can become. Okay, because all of you care about each other. That's a love interaction. If you have 10 people and they all interact with fear, they're all afraid that the other one might take something that they have or get ahead of them or something like it's fear-based, you minimize what you can do as a group. See? So that's why it turns out that way, because consciousness is basically the interaction of a lot of individuated unit of consciousness. The optimal state that interaction can take is love, cooperative, helping each other, where the vector is about other, not about self. As soon as the vector turns about self, then the interaction isn't optimal anymore. It could be better. So, and you can do that kind of on an economic model and that kind of model. It's just a general fact of life. So evolving toward love being the thing that we're to do is just a fundamental aspect of consciousness itself. It's not like somebody figured that would be a good idea, or it was the word spoken in an order that we're all supposed to follow. It's just a natural outcome of the nature of evolving consciousness. It's just the way it is.
Thank you.
That's right. This side of the room is getting ahead, aren't they? You're not going to let them get away with that, right?
I just wanted to ask: does the consciousness itself have some sort of boundary? Is it sort of an entity in itself? And if it is there other ones that we possibly don't know about that exist as well, or is it one, or is it boundaryless?
That's a real good question, and the answer to that is that it's impossible to tell. And the reason it's impossible to tell is because in order to see the larger consciousness system as a thing apart from us, you have to get outside of it. You can't be inside of it, you have to be outside of it. And we are consciousness. How do we get outside of what we are? You see, so we can't get outside of the system. So for us, it looks like it's everything there is, right? And there's just this one big consciousness system, but we have to be aware that that's not necessarily true. In the books, I take this idea and I play with it a while and talk about, this may just be one cell in a larger consciousness system, you see, and we don't know. But there is a limit to information, and by saying we don't know doesn't mean that nobody's figured it out yet, or we haven't gotten the information. It means it's impossible. It's not a logical thing that can be done. To know that answer would be illogical, and the little example I give in my talks is that think of a intestinal bacterium. What does the bacteria in your intestine know about farming and produce and trucks and grocery stores and refrigerators and all the things that end up with the food that goes down there that bacterium works on. Well, it can't know anything about it. Even if it's a genius bacteria with an IQ of 200, it doesn't know. Best it could do would be pass information up and down and maybe even communicate with bacteria elsewhere, on the body or something, but it just can't know about fusion in the sun and rainfall and, farmers. So, because it doesn't have access to that, and it can't because it's locked. You see, it's locked away where it can't get that information. So it's not a failure of the bacteria to figure it out, it's just no way for them to know. So knowledge has limits, and it has limits because of who and what we are. We're individuated units of consciousness, and we can only see so far. Beyond that, we don't know, but it's just speculation. You can speculate, but the speculation will never be fact.
Isn't it locked because it's got a boundary?
It has a boundary, you see, that's the thing. And it has to have a boundary because it has to be real. And this is something that hangs people up, particularly, and here's where the right brain people get hung up. The left brain people have their hang-ups, but the right brain people get hung up on, it has to have a boundary because it has to be real. Nothing real can be infinite. And the right brain people say, well, what's wrong with that? Nothing real can be infinite. The reason for that is that infinity isn't a place, it is the spot, it's something you never get to. If you could get to something that was infinite, then there's something bigger than that, so it's not infinite. You see, infinity is a concept, it's an abstract concept, mostly in math, where it's used, and it's the largest quantity that could ever happen, right? Well, you can never get to that. You can only approach it. Because if you could get to that, you could add 1 to it or multiply it by 10 or square it, and you'd have something bigger. And if you could get to that, you could do the same thing. So it's just an abstraction of the largest thing that you could imagine that you could never actually create. So nothing real can be infinite. If something real were infinite, it would require infinite energy, infinite number of bits, if it's information, infinitely have all these things. And then that gets to be a problem. It's got infinite whole bunches of things that have to work together. Well, and it must be bigger than infinite. So, it really wasn't infinite in the first place because it's bigger than infinite. And you see, they get into these logical tail chases that it just doesn't work. It breaks down logically. So, as soon as you say that a system, this larger conscious system, is a real system, it's got a boundary. It's not infinite. As soon as it has a boundary, it has limitations. As soon as it has limitations, then it's like, are we up against the stops? Is all the data taken up? Is it going to reboot tomorrow or something? And it's like, well, you just don't know because that's not on our pay grade to understand that, to see it. We can't get out of the system to look back at the system from a critical viewpoint. We're inside the system. So we just don't know. It might be just a cell in something larger. It might just be all there is. And practically, it'll make no difference to us in a practical way. We won't make any choice because of thinking it one way or another. It has no practical impact. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an actual impact on us. Just like farmers and the sun and trucks and grocery stores have a big impact on what that bacterium is going to work on next, you see. But the bacterium can't know anything about it. So it's that sort of thing. So there may be things there that impact us indirectly. We don't know, but it can't impact us directly. So it's a very good question, and the only answer is that it can't really be known because you get into a logical, you get into a logical problem where it actually, it's not that we don't know it or that we haven't figured it out, we're not smart enough yet. It's just that it can't be known because you can't see the system you're in from outside the system that you're in because you're in the system. So it's a logical problem. Yeah.
So it kind of moves on from your question, and you're talking about infinity, but my first question, which I wrote down, was what's the relationship of numbers and reality? And I noticed you said it's no 0 or 1.
Well, that's just the probability of anything happening. There's no 0 or 1. The numbers to our reality, there's a big overlap there because this is a computed reality. We live in a virtual reality. That means it's a computed reality. Okay, well, if you compute things, then you're going to have things that abide by numbers, right? Because that's the way computing is. You don't compute things just randomly. You compute things with order, with process. And a lot of that's mathematical process. It would be very hard to have all the things here in this reality if you didn't use any, mathematical process. So you get the seashells that follow the Fibonacci series. You get all kinds of things like that. You get fractals. See, this is a fractal reality. It's a consciousness evolution process fractal. A fractal, as we think of it, is a geometric fractal. You take a geometric simple shape and then you keep putting it on itself again, lots of various sizes and so on, and that makes it fractal. Okay. Now, this is a process fractal. So you have a process. You have this simple process, and you take that process and you build that process on itself and on itself. And what's the process? The process of evolution. So evolution is the process, and that process goes in and evolves and comes out with something, and then you start there again with that same process, but now it's starting at a higher place, right? And you evolve, and then you start there. So the process builds up. So this turns out to be a fractal reality, and because this particular virtual reality is a 3D virtual reality, what happens is that all of the natural stuff here, mountains, waters, lakes, clouds, you can reproduce those with geometric fractal, because this is a geometric virtual reality. It's a 3D. See, we work on 3D geometry. So you can make mountains and things with fractals. That's why your places like Pixar and so on, they invented ways to do all that animation without having to do the equations or draw the little pictures and then make them move a little bit at a time, and they do it with fractals. Okay. So when you see those scenes of the mountains and the forests and the clouds and the rivers and all that, nobody painted that. They got generated out of a computer, and it got generated in seconds. You see, it's real quick. It would have taken artists a long time to do that. But it's fractal geometry, because it's geometric, it shows up, it gives us our reality here. So because it's a fractal, it's a fractal reality. So you have numbers. Numbers are the logic of quantity. Okay? So that's what mathematics is. Mathematics is the logic of quantity. It's how quantities relate to each other. The very basic thing that a computer does is that it adds. Period. It adds very quickly. So it can add so fast that you can make it think it's multiplying and dividing, doing all kinds of things because of the clever way that it adds. But basically, it's the logic of numbers. That's all any kind of math is. Okay, so in a place that is a place of quantity, right? This is a 3D place where things come in boxes and sizes and quantity and measurement and so on. And then obviously numbers, the logic of numbers is an important expression of this, which is why physicists find math to be the perfect tool to describe reality. Okay. So if you take physics, you'll find out that basically what you've taken is applied mathematics, because it's mathematics is what describes what's going on here. So if you shoot a cannon into the air, it's the mathematics that'll tell you where it lands, because all the processes in between can be described in terms of the logic of quantity.
It's been a very my subjective experience. Numbers have been, they keep coming to me.
Yeah, numbers are at the root.
Yeah.
Quantity is at the root. Logic is at the root.
Just one other question. You talked about bringing everything together as one, and that'll be when it changes, like the world or everything. What's your kind of like strategy? Like how far off do you see that kind of?
Not tomorrow. I see that right now the pace seems to be quickening. My own idea of how it might fall out, and I don't know, there's free will. So you have probable realities, but you don't have fixed realities. So I'm just looking at the probabilities. And because the high priests of our culture are scientists, and because our culture that we call Western culture is no longer Western culture, it's world culture. So the scientists are basically the high priests of world culture these days. you're not going to get the first big change until the high priests start to change their mind. It'll be like it's been for a long time. You see, until the high priests change their mind, there's all kinds of little groups here and there, like this group and other groups. They've been around for ages and ages, and they're always out on the margins. They're always in the periphery. So all kinds of people who have understood how reality works. I mean, you can go back to, I don't know what it was, 400 BC or something, and you can read Lao Tzu, right? He obviously knew how reality worked, right? If you read it, it's just perfect, it makes sense. You know, he understood, and so did Buddha, and so did, you know, lots of people. Well, that's thousands of years. So if we had all this truth for thousands of years, why isn't it common knowledge? Why doesn't everybody know it? Well, it stays in the margins. The reason it stays in the margins, and when I say in the margins, it stays in a minority. You know, a small minority of people understand it. Well, the reason it stays there is because the high priests have never taken it in and deemed it universal. Now, in small communities they did. So those communities where they did, it kind of got universal, right? So we have, you know, a whole lot of Buddhists in, you know, parts of the East where they dominate. Well, that's because the high priests there were Buddhists, and Buddhism kind of spread all over that area. But that's not worldwide, because that was a time when the world was very large. Now's a time when the world is very small, and the high priests happen to be the scientists. And until the scientists come around to see that reality is virtual, step one, I think it's going to stay in the margins, unless we change our, you know, unless we change our politics and we vote out the high priests or something. But that's not likely. Everybody may wish for it, but it's not likely. So that's step one. Step two then is, once the high priests say, well, virtual reality is better physics, we have to accept that. What that does, and they won't go to consciousness, they won't go to soul, they won't go to out of body, all that stuff is still crazy stuff. But if they just get to virtual reality is better physics, it's the only thing they have to get to. Because once that paradigm is jumped, and one realizes that this is a computed simulation, which is what it means to say this is a virtual reality, you're just not going to be able to stop a few 100 million people from saying, who computed it? What's computing this reality? What other system is larger, bigger, whatever than us, that we are a computed reality of that other system? See, a system can't compute itself. Well, a little logical point there, right? A program cannot compute itself. It has to come from elsewhere.
The architect. So you look like the guy at the Matrix, and I'm looking at you now. It's really creepy.
It has to come from elsewhere. And as soon as the scientists agree to a virtual reality, you see, they will immediately end up, not because they intended to, but unintended, they will agree to a larger reality than just this physical reality. And once that door is opened, then there's going to be a free-for-all for a while, where you're going to have lots of people trying to assert control over that concept. And there'll be a lot of infighting and a lot of unpleasantry and so on as that works its way out. But hopefully by then, there will be enough larger understanding of how things work that the concept of this computer is consciousness. Computer, you know, consciousness is the computer, and that it wasn't programmed. Our reality wasn't programmed by the master programmer. Our reality evolved as a simulation. You see, it just evolved to be the way it is. It started with a rule set. It started with some things that told it, you know, how hot, how much pressure, gravity, you know, the kinds of things, and then that's the Big Bang. It's the big digital bang. The bang was inside a computer. And the computer took those parameters and let it evolve, and here we are. You see, you've got the Big Bang, you've got the evolution to us. So it's an evolved reality. If they come to that conclusion that consciousness is the computer, then all is well. We'll make progress from then on, because when consciousness is the computer, then the next step is that the reason for existence is love. It falls right out, because in a digital system, that's the optimal system. So it won't take mathematicians very long to end up with that conclusion, and here we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya around a campfire, and it's all fine. But we may have a rough period in between where that's not the reason, because everyone who has a worldview has a religion, has a point of view otherwise, then they will want to step into that vacuum that's left by the scientists to admit that there is an other out there, that we are its creation. So, and that fight, I don't know how that might end up. But I think it's good. I mean, it has to happen, right? So it's like that ball has to be set rolling and it'll bounce wherever it goes. But you can't get it to move at all if you don't pull the chuck out from under it and get it rolling. So I'm thinking that we are getting closer and closer to the point where scientists see virtual reality is better physics. It just explains a whole lot of things that are unexplainable now and explains everything else that's been explained and been tested otherwise. Step one. Step two, realizing that consciousness is the computer. And after that, I think step three is probably obvious, but I don't know. Now, how long will this take? It could take place in 20 years. It could take place in the hundreds. I don't have any idea. It just depends on when we, as we the humans, are ready for that. For that step. Yeah, the outcome will get there. It's kind of inevitable in that sense, because I think it is better physics. Eventually, it'll be accepted as better physics. Just like Newtonian physics was better physics than saying that the angels pushed the heavenly bodies around. It was just better, simpler, answered more questions, and eventually, even though it took maybe 100 years, it eventually rose to the top. That's the way it happened. So yes, I think in a way it's inevitable, but how they get there and how many bumps are in the road, and how many people get ground up in the process. That all is going to take place, in the future, and we don't know. But it is happening, and it's getting quicker. I say year by year, I see more and more support inside the traditional physics community. See, it's important it comes from there. If it's coming from the outside, if it's coming out from the margins, well, it's always been in the margins. What's critical is that now it's starting to bubble up inside the traditional physics community and be accepted, not because they now believe in woo-woo, stuff. It's because it's better physics. You see? It actually makes sense to them. And that's the difference. Before, it never made sense. So they could dismiss it as somebody's imagination. But now when it actually solves their problems, it's hard to turn away forever. So it's coming. We're working our way there. But it's not going to be smooth, I expect. But that's what we're doing. That's where we come into it, all of us. We are helping the planet to get ready, so that when we get to that opportunity, we won't move to my God's bigger than your God, and if you don't like it, let's fight. Let's have a war about it. We're not going to go there. We're going to go to consciousness, love. That's the answer. But the way that happens is it has to have enough people who understand that when the opportunity comes, that's the dominant.
That tipping point.
That's the tipping point. That's the dominant thrust, you see. So, why am I here and talking, and why are you here learning? And because we're part of that getting ready. And that's why it's important that this information gets spread. It's important that you guys come and do this and learn, see the bigger picture, and find out about the larger reality, understand about consciousness, because that's where the solution lies. So, we're all part of the solution in that sense, and the solution just needs to grow. And it is growing, and hopefully it will grow in time, that when the tipping point comes and the opening comes for somebody to be other than this physical reality, then we'll be here to say, we know what that other is. It's just consciousness. Relax, folks. Nobody's God's going to punish you because you don't believe in him. It's going to be okay. And it's a good story, because love is hard to complain about it. So that's kind of where I see it, where it's going and why.
No, thank you.
Sorry, can I just pick up on that point? Is there a point where that can, when you're saying the tipping point, and is there a point where you're saying that consciousness evolves? Is there a point where it could possibly
Yes, it could de-evolve. I mean, we've oscillated a lot. We could go back into another dark age, for another 1,000 years if we're not clever. It doesn't have to go that way, but then another 1,000 years after that, it's going to perk its way back up to where it is. When I say it's inevitable, I don't necessarily mean in the short term or even in the next millennium. You know, it's hard to say because we can de-evolve as well as evolve. But eventually, I believe we will succeed because it works. It's the only thing that works. And though humans don't seem to be real bright and we're slow learners, I think eventually we'll get it because it works and the other ways don't. Love works. Fear doesn't work. Fear is unstable. Now, fear works in the short term. For a short while with fear, you can grab a lot of marbles right out of the game, but it's unstable. It doesn't last. It doesn't progress. It doesn't build. It doesn't create. It just uses. So eventually, I think we'll figure it out. As slow as we might be.
Through all your years of lowering your personal noise through your training methods, what percentage, you as Tom Campbell, the World of Warcraft player, what percentage of the entity that plays you do you think the data you've gathered?
Oh, what percentage plays me? Probably a fairly large percentage. I came here with a plan and a mission, if you will, and things to do and things to accomplish. And that has been in the process for more than my lifetime, more than several of my lifetimes if I've been part of the process. So it's, you know, yes. So it depends. You're kind of asking like how much of somebody's life is kind of planned out and scripted, and how much is random, and how much is whatever. Well, the way it generally works is that for most people, probably most of the people that are here in this room, your life is probably somewhat planned. You had some plans of what you were going to learn and how you were going to do it, maybe some people you might do it with. You're kind of at that level where planning is useful. If you go back earlier in your evolution, where you were just beginning, no planning is needed. They don't know enough to plan. You see, at a point, it's just experience. All you need is experience. So when you're in the beginning, it's a jump in, jump out. You know, you jump into this reality frame, you get experience. And then when you leave, well, you just jump back in and get experience. It doesn't matter so much what your experience is because you just need experience. You know, again, you can't come to conclusions without enough experience. The more you go in that evolutionary process, the more you say, well, you know, my problem in the last bunch of times has been anger management. You know, I just keep flying off, I keep getting angry, and I need to come up with a scenario that really challenges me on that anger management, but at the same time gives me a chance to succeed with it. And I'm going to go in focused on that. You know, so then that's planning. You see, now you have enough experience that you see where's your high points, where are your low points, what do you need work in, what's a good situation for that, who might help you in that, you know, how do you want to set that up, and then you get nudged along the way. So something will just resonate. You know, you'll be walking along and minding your own business, and suddenly you resonate with some kind of thing. Well, and you turn off and go that direction. Well, that's a nudge in the larger consciousness system saying, you're supposed to, you know, go over here, this is your plan. Stick with the plan, and it just feels right to you. You know, I don't know why I need to do that, but it just feels right, or I have to go there or meet this person or whatever, and everything just feels so right. And it changes your life, and you go off and whatever. A lot of times that's because there is some planning going on. So you're thinking like it's not that you're being manipulated. You're not being manipulated, you still have free will. You can still say, no, I don't want to, and not do it. And the plan's broken. So the plans don't always have to work out. The larger conscious system can give you a nudge and you might refuse to take it. Go some other way. It happens. Well, it's just a lifetime. You know, it's the way you have to think of it. You know, you got another 1,000 of those you can spend. So if it doesn't work out this time, maybe you do better next time. So you think of it as in the big picture, like that. So yes, I had a lot of scripting. But what I do here in this physical reality is probably, you know, it was scripted. It's been in to some extent, and it's been in planning for a long time, many lifetimes. But it's not the main thing that I'm supposed to be doing. It's other duties as assigned, if you will. The main things that I've done, the things that I feel have been most significant in my accomplishments, haven't taken place in physical reality. They've taken place outside physical reality. So
Wow.
I think this is a other duties as assigned. You know, if you get somebody you can put a harness on, you know, you get as much out of them as you can. That's sort of the way it works. But this is important.
And just another quick one. What's your favorite personal technique for lowering the noise?
For lowering the noise? Well, you know, I first started meditating. My first experience in meditating was with transcendental meditation when I was a student. I was a graduate student. And I paid my $25 and I got my mantra. I gave my banana. And if you've done that, you'll know. You know, you had to come with a fruit, right? Fruit and a hanky. But I gave them my banana, got my mantra, and went out to practice it. I sat down and they said, practice it for 15 minutes just so you don't forget it, you know, and then you're free to go, and then practice it twice a day, 20 minutes, you know, and so on. We got all that directions. So I did what I was told. I went out and I sat down and I started to say my mantra, and 45 minutes later, I thought, gee, you know, is my 10 minutes up yet? You know? And I looked at my watch and it was like, wow, what happened? So that was my first time meditating. So I never really found meditating too difficult. And when I was then in my classes, you know, I was the one that would almost fall off the chair because I'd lose the body. I was gone. So I've done this before, and it came very quickly. So TM was my meditation technique, and I shouldn't say it's my favorite. It's been the only one I ever used. But shortly after that, I'd only been a TM meditator for probably a year or two when I ran into Bob Monroe. Now he had his own technique where he, you know, first relax your toes and your ankles and your legs and this and that and your head. You go through this whole relaxation process, and basically that was another way of meditating. Yeah. And so I went through a lot of that, focused 10, you know, and I went through it because that's what Bob did. But I found out that I could be in Bob's focused 10 in, you know, 2-3 seconds. You know, it didn't take long. You just lie down and you were there. It happened very quickly. So, and the rest of them are focused 12s and 15s and 21s and et cetera. Those are all just metaphors. You know, they don't really exist. They're nothing real or fundamental. They're just metaphors. If you're at a place and your place is called, you know, 78, then if they want you to stretch out and find a different place because you're getting a little tired of that one, then it's called 82. You know, it doesn't matter. It gives you permission to do something different. Otherwise, your ritual becomes, this is it. All right, this is the way it is. And then that gives you permission, so then you can kind of stretch out and do something else because somebody's given it another name. It's more mind games we play with ourselves. But I found meditation to be very simple, and getting to the point consciousness state was almost immediate from the beginning. So I'm not a very good one to answer that question, which one I like best. I've only tried one and it worked fine.
Does diet play a role? Do you have any specific
diet
diets?
Does play a role. It plays a very big role. You probably asked that because you knew the answer. If not, I didn't pay him to say that. But I would have if I'd known he'd say it. Yes, diet plays a big role. There's a few things you should care about if you want to be good at out of body as well as meditation, as well as getting and holding that state. And probably the most important one is sugar. Sugar will cloud your awareness, clouds your consciousness. Sugar will make your consciousness foggy. Best way I can describe it is, it's like in the old days when all the antihistamines that you could find had printed on the bottle, you know, do not operate machinery, you know, will make you drowsy, whatever. You know that feeling you got when you took an antihistamine, like your brain just turned to cotton, you know, and you're just kind of like a zombie? That's what sugar does. Except you don't notice because you're like that all the time. You see? That degree of zombiness is normal because you've been eating sugar and probably been a sugar addict, since you're 2 years old. Most of us have, because, your first birthday, somebody hands you a cupcake with icing on it, right? So you've been a sugar addict from before you can even remember. And the reason sugar does that is that your brain runs on glucose. Your brain is very glucose sensitive, okay? And the way you function, your neurology is glucose sensitive. The way you're thinking, sugar is an important part of your functioning. And when you ingest sugar, it ingests so quickly that in double E talk, it rings the system. It provides your blood sugar gets shot up, and then it drops down. And before that even happens, because that takes a couple of hours, it's been shot up again, it drops down, and before that actually those things damp out. It's constantly being run. Ringing the system, like ringing the bell, it causes a big pulse. You hit it once, you get a big bang, and then it kind of dies out, right? That's what I mean by ringing the system. It's a double E term. It means it gives it a big jolt, and it takes a while for that jolt to decay, okay? That jolt decays over hours, like 4 or 5 hours. And hardly anybody in our culture ever goes that long without hitting another jolt. Often 6 or 7 or 8 other jolts. It's a constant process. And longer cycles take about 2 weeks. So there's a main big cycle that damps out in about 4 hours. There's a longer cycle that takes about 2 weeks before it damps out. Because sugar also is a player in your hormones, your endocrine system, pineal gland, everything in all of those systems that are balancing systems. You get a little bit, you secrete a bit of this to change that, which changes that, and keeps you balanced and even. A lot of that stuff changes with glucose. Glucose is a big driver in your system. So if your driver in your system, your big thing, sugar is brain food, right? You need that glucose. If it's always ringing, if it's always zing, 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 bing, if it's unstable, you become fuzzy, foggy-minded. You can't really function real clearly. But you've been like that since you were 2 years old, so it seems clear to you. It's just totally normal. It doesn't seem like, oh yeah, see the fog. You don't notice any fog because fog is normal. If you cut out sugar, and I mean entirely, not that you just only eat half a candy bar, instead of the whole candy bar, but if you cut it out, which means you read every ingredient, and if it has honey, if it has molasses, if it has glucose, sucrose, maltose, any kind of ose, and all of the fake sugars, all the natural sugars, all of it, if you just cut out so it doesn't have a molecule of sugar in it, and you do that for a minimum of 3 months to 4 or 5 months, it'll change your meditation. It'll change your out of body. It'll change that point consciousness. What was kind of foggy and drifting around will become very sharp and clear, because you've taken your mind isn't all over the place, because your sugar's all over the place. Of course, what happens is also we're wearing our pancreas out, because our pancreas keeps trying to stabilize the sugar, right, with insulin. And in our culture, there's so much sugar all the time that diabetes has become an endemic. It's like a large proportion have adult onset diabetes, which is basically you've just overdriven this pancreas. You're driving it nuts trying to keep it stable, and it can't keep it stable because every time it does this to bring it down, something else shoots it up, and then it'll do more of that to get it down, and then all of that up crashes. Now it's going the other way, and it just can never catch up because we keep pouring sugar in that keeps ringing the system. So that's the first thing. You will get clarity. And how will you know you get clarity? You won't notice. You don't eat sugar, 5 months go by, and you can say, well, I don't notice much difference. That's because it's been gradual. All you have to do then is make a mistake and take a bite of something that has sugar in it, you will notice the difference. Suddenly it's like,
You're related to unnatural sugar?
Huh?
You're talking about unnatural sugar?
I'm talking about all the sugars. The only one I've come across, and I've just done this by trial and error, it's not theory, it's just trial and error, is barley malt. Barley malt in low quantities is okay. Now, natural sugars bound up in fruit are okay. Fruit has fructose in it. But if you eat an apple, that fructose is bound up in a complex way, and it takes your digestive system, you see, a long time to digest it. So it doesn't ring the system. It leaches into your body slowly. So that's okay. So eat a banana, eat 2 bananas, but don't eat 6 bananas. Don't eat, a whole bag of apples or something, because then you will get too much. It'll take longer before it gets to your system, but you're going to get a zing from it anyway. So eat fruit, fine. But don't eat the thing that says all natural, fruit juice sweetened. What that means is they've taken fruit, they've processed out the fructose, and then they've poured it in the product. That fructose will nail you just like sugar or anything else, because it's too much, and it digests quickly when it's not bound up to the other material in the apple. You see. It's that other material, you have to break that other material again before you get to the fructose. So it's a longer process of digesting the whole thing. So that's kind of the story. But sugar is the biggest deal as far as just clearness goes. Now there's other things that have to do with health and whatever, but mostly they won't have a large effect on your consciousness directly. They affect it indirectly in that they affect your health, they affect how you feel. What do I eat? I mostly eat, well, I can just tell you what my normal day of eating is. I get up and for breakfast I have a green smoothie, which is raw vegetables and some raw fruit ground up. Then for lunch, I'll have a cup of bean soup. It has like 14 different kinds of beans in it, mushrooms, onions, and nuts, seeds. And for dinner, I'll have maybe another cup of bean soup, and by cup I'm talking about maybe 10 ounces, not much. And then for dinner, if I'm splurging, I'll have maybe half an avocado.
Whoa.
If I'm not, that would be a splurge. And that's it. That's all I eat. And I don't need any more than that. I'm basically the same weight as I was when I was 18, 19, 20, and in good health. But I don't eat meat, I don't eat dairy. Well, when I say I don't eat it, I do eat it when there's nothing else available. Sometimes I would go without, but I go to somebody's house and that's what they serve, I eat it. I'm not hard over on any of it. It's like, oh, get it away from me, I can't eat it, I'd rather starve than eat that stuff. If it's around, then I'll eat it. When I'm traveling here on the airplane doesn't serve food. They serve other stuff. It passes for food. They don't serve anything that I would want to eat on purpose. But, it's been 24 hours. I eat whatever they give me. It's the same way. You go into a restaurant and you're always guessing what's in it. Other things that are bad for you and what clouds your mind are preservatives. A lot of preservatives but the reason I don't mention them first is because the preservative that clouds your mind in an hour will be gone. That sugar thing is something we do all day long. But if you can keep putting that in your system too, but preservatives will cloud your mind temporarily. Other things, as long as you don't overdo, anything's bad for you. If you just eat it all the time, you overdo it. You need variety, of course. But green vegetables, raw fruit, water. Oh, I like things like pomegranates. That's one of my favorite things, to tear apart a pomegranate, chew up the seeds and stuff like that. So that's another thing I'll do for a treat. Beside my little bowl of bean soup, I'll have a pomegranate, or not one. Pamela and I'll share a pomegranate. Whole pomegranate would be too much. They're that big. But I don't need any more than that. But now, look, I'm in another 2 weeks or so, I'm going to be 68. Okay, another 3 weeks, I'll be 68. The older you get, the less you need to eat. Your metabolisms get slower. So, if you're out there and you're 20 years old or 25 years old and you're thinking, that's not much, I'd starve to death if I ate that. Well, when the time you're 68, you probably won't starve to death if you ate that. So that's another thing to consider, is that I don't need as much food as maybe most of you do. Don't need as many calories. But energy's fine, you know. I don't mind standing up and talking for 8 hours at a time. You know, I do that in my workshops. If you've looked at them, you know, because you've got 8 hours worth to listen to get the whole thing. But I can do that for days in a row, you know, where I'm on my feet and basically presenting for hours and hours. So energy levels are good. So that's how I eat, and those are the things that I think are most likely to affect your consciousness. But I think you'd find a dramatic change in the clarity of your consciousness if you didn't try to avoid the preservatives, particularly within an hour or two of your meditation, but try to avoid the sugar, period, because that takes hours and hours to get rid of. And I think the long pulse is like 2 weeks. And who went more than 2 weeks without sugar, without adding more pulses to that? Basically, you get a pulse when you first eat it, it goes down, and then in half a week or so, you get another one, and each one gets smaller. So the first pulse is big, the next pulse is not as big, the next pulse is not as big, the next pulse, you know, it damps out. But you don't get to the part where it really damps out for about 2 weeks. It's affecting your systems. Exactly how it affects your system, I don't know. You know, you'd have to be a biologist to know that, but it's changing things. It's changing hormones, it's changing parameters in your system that then move things this way, and then that's too much, so they move it the other way. Oh, that's not enough, so they move it back that way. And there's just things in your system that are unstable. It takes that long for it to work out. Another question?